In this update, we're going to examine a few, though certainly not all, of the lies told by the ATF and FBI in their official independent investigations of Waco. We invite inquiries from the media. In fact, we dare the media to finally publicize the truth. And we challenge each member of Congress to demand and conduct congressional inquiries into the events in Waco. But first, we're going to show you why the government lied. This photograph was taken at the front door of the Branch Davidians' house the morning the ATF arrived. If you examine it carefully, you can see there was a child outside as the ATF began firing wildly. The features of the child in the photograph were deliberately blurred by someone to prevent recognition. This alteration can be seen by the naked eye examining a print from the negative. The alteration is more proof of the depths to which people have stooped in covering up the truth about what happened that day. The child has been identified as probably being Cyrus Koresh, David Koresh's 8-year-old little boy. After the raid, these agents were captured on film running with a small body to an ambulance. If these agents were carrying an adult, you would see legs or some part of the body extending below or beyond the agents themselves. Other children were killed that day, too, as a helicopter fired down into the house. Annetta Richards, one of the grandmothers who came out with the children, told the world that she and the children had been fired down upon by the helicopters. Children who left Mount Carmel the day after the raid drew pictures for the psychiatrists who interviewed them.
And then as I asked her, is there anything else? She took her crayon and went, and I asked what that was, and she said that was bullets.
More proof that the helicopter had fired down on a room full of women and children. Dick DeGuerin, the attorney who entered Mount Carmel during the siege, also said he saw the room and bullet holes where a helicopter had sprayed the roof of the home, killing a nursing mother and children in the room. Unfortunately, he didn't share this information with the public until after the fire, nor did his former college classmate from Baylor University, FBI Director William Sessions. And in the tape-recorded conversations between the Branch Davidians and the McLennan County Sheriff's deputy, known as the 911 tapes, the Branch Davidians frequently refer to the helicopters firing in on them from overhead, and they are clearly terrified of them.
Their chopper with more of them.
What?
Another chopper with more people and more guns going off. Here they come.
All right. Wayne,
More firing. That's not us, that's them.
Okay, all right.
David Koresh, in the 911 tapes and in a radio interview, says that the ATF killed his children.
No. Let me tell you something.
Yes, sir.
You see, you brought a bunch of guys out here and you killed some of my children. We told you we wanted to talk.
This photograph shows one of the helicopters used by the government on the day of the raid. This helicopter has a .308 machine gun mounted in the doorway. Notice the words United States Army on the tail, contrary to the government's claims that the 3 helicopters at Waco were unarmed National Guard helicopters. Remember how government officials frequently told us that the Branch Davidians were abusing the children, as if this raid was for the children?
What impressed me is that the Bureau time after time asked Koresh for some evidence that the children were okay. The Bureau sent in videotapes asking Koresh to do something to prove that the children were okay. Negotiators consistently asked that the children be sent out. We did not receive verification that the children were okay.
The report admits that Janet Reno lied when she told us that David Koresh had refused to send out videotapes showing the condition of the children. It says, that night the Davidians sent out a videotape of the children in the compound. The negotiators' log shows that when the tape was reviewed, there was concern that if the tape were released to the media, Koresh would gain much sympathy. These 2 men, Olaitan Oyatumbi and Gary Spalding, drove day and night from South Bend, Indiana to bring baby food and chicken feed requested by the Branch Davidians to Mount Carmel. As you can see, they were very peaceful. Yet they were arrested. Their crime? Bringing baby food to Mount Carmel. This occurred only 3 days before Janet Reno claimed that the government assault with tanks was out of concern for the children. In these scenes from the day of the fire, shown in Waco the Big Lie, you can see that a tank was over the outdoor underground tunnel for more than 2 hours that morning. You can see agents getting in and out of those tanks over the underground bunker. And you can see that smoke was pouring from the underground bunker less than 5 minutes before a tank smashed the end of the house. The tank collapsed the house down onto the trap door to the underground bunker. Anyone in that bunker was trapped. No one in the house would be able to run to the safety of the bunker to escape the deadly gas and flames. Autopsies showed that many children died of blunt trauma. On the Maury Povich show, Coroner Rodney Crowe told how those children died.
3 children had blunt force trauma, but it was from the falling concrete in the bunker that fell on them. There's an opening in the top of the bunker, 8 feet approximately in diameter, and large chunks of concrete fell on these people.
21 of them died of gunshot wounds, and the rest died of smoke inhalation and, of course, suffocation due to being buried in debris when the bunker collapsed.
So now we know why the Treasury Department, the White House, and ATF and Department of Justice were so desperately lying to us all along. We were told every day that this raid, the gassing, the attack on the house, and the destruction of evidence had all been because of concerns for the children.
We had concerns for the children.
The big lie continues. The ATF is under the direct control of the Treasury Department. As head of the Treasury Department, Lloyd Benson would be ultimately responsible for any wrongdoing by ATF. Yet it was Benson who chose the so-called independent investigators. Each of the 3 so-called independent investigators Benson chose had been involved directly in the planning, execution, or cover-up of the police firebombing of the headquarters of a group called MOVE in Philadelphia that resulted in the fiery deaths of MOVE members in a situation similar to Waco. According to the introductory letter from Treasury Secretary Lloyd Benson to President Clinton, the committee's report was supposed to be a vigorous and thorough investigation of the events leading to the loss of law enforcement and civilian lives near Waco, Texas on February 28, 1993. But on the cover of the report, it doesn't say it is a thorough investigation of the events in Waco. It says it is an investigation of Vernon Wayne Howell. Even in the Treasury's report, which was not released until September 1993, the ATF persists in calling the Branch Davidian house the heavily armed fortress-like compound, even though by now we have all seen that the house was a simply constructed masonite exterior frame home. And on page 3 it begins, "in memory of," and then names each of the deceased ATF agents. There doesn't seem to be any question of whether this was going to be an independent or vigorous and thorough investigation of the events on February 28, 1993. The overall perspective for the raid was spelled out in an internal Treasury Department memorandum from Christopher Kyler, Assistant Treasury Secretary for Enforcement, to Mike Langan before the raid, in which Kyler matter-of-factly says that the agents will be raiding a Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventist church. It doesn't get any plainer than this. They've spelled it out for us. The government set out to conduct a military assault on a church. This same memorandum specifically says that the ATF raid will be assisted by state, local, and military authorities. Again, spelling it out for us, every level of government participated in this military terroristic attack on a church full of 140 men, women, and children. The results of the supposedly independent investigation, known as the Treasury Report, were released September 29, 1993. It berated ATF leadership for failing to cancel the raid when they knew the ATF had lost the element of surprise. ATF Director Stephen Higgins and others were forced to resign, with full pensions. The ATF tried to make it seem that they were admitting error by blaming leaders for losing the element of surprise.
And we had our plan down, we had a diversion down, all were put into effect, and they were waiting.
What we had was someone who eliminated the element of surprise, which is what we needed, and in so doing, our agents walked into an ambush.
The main problem we had, I don't believe, is that we were outmaneuvered or outplanned. The problem we had is that we were outgunned. You know, they had bigger firearms than we had. They were able to shoot through doors, and due to that, you know, a lot of our agents were hurt.
The ATF had the Branch Davidians under surveillance for over a month from the house across the street. They knew the land was completely flat. There could be no possibility of surprising the Branch Davidians with 100 men arriving in cattle cars visible from miles away. The Treasury report admits that ATF's own public relations person, Sharon Wheeler, contacted several Dallas television stations several days before the raid. The lie that the ATF lost the element of surprise was aided by the media while showing us this very edited piece of footage of the first day of the raid, over and over, as an announcer would say, the ATF was met with a hail of gunfire. And just in case you somehow hadn't heard the ATF claim that the Branch Davidians were waiting for the ATF, within a week after Mount Carmel was burned to the ground, NBC television aired the government's official propaganda as a movie, showing Branch Davidians at all the windows with guns waiting for the ATF to arrive. If you have doubts that this was propaganda, consider that the Treasury report repeatedly states that U.S. Army Special Forces planned the raid and trained the agents. The ATF raid leader is former Special Forces, and even advisors to the independent investigators included Delta Force Special Forces. Then, get a copy of this Army Psychological Operations Training Manual, a how-to on propaganda that says that making a movie is an important element of military occupation. Another lie told by ATF in the official report says, on Wednesday, February 24th, ATF rescheduled its raid from Monday, March 1st to Sunday, February 28th, because it expected the Tribune-Herald to publish its Sinful Messiah series on Sunday. The warrants were signed on February 25th and expired on February 28th, the day the raid took place. The raid was never moved up a day, and these warrants weren't filed with the court until March 1st either. The ATF is lying when it claims they lost the element of surprise, and the ATF is lying when it says it moved the raid up a day so as not to lose the element of surprise. So were the Branch Davidians waiting for them, or is that a lie too? John McLemore is a reporter for KWTX Channel 10 television in Waco, Texas. Both he and cameraman Dan Maloney were present at Mount Carmel on February 28th, the day ATF raided Mount Carmel, and they claim to have filmed the scenes of the initial raid. In one of the first Associated Press newspaper reports that came across the wire services on February 28th, John McLemore is quoted as saying, "They came right in, parked right by the front door, and made a frontal assault on the building." Another article across the AP wires on February 28th said that, according to witnesses, federal agents hid in livestock trailers as they drove up to the compound. As 3 National Guard helicopters approached, the 100 law officers stormed the main home, throwing concussion grenades and screaming, "Come out!" There is no mention of any barrage of gunfire from the Branch Davidians in these first reports. And in actuality, the Branch Davidians reacted the way any American would react when his home was broken into by armed terrorists. They first called the police. They dialed 911.
911, what's your emergency?
There are 75 men around our building shooting at us.
Just a moment.
In the tape recordings of these conversations,